Thank you for the warm welcome. There's going to be a difference between this presentation and the previous ones. So you saw the previous presenters mainly on that part of the stage. I was asked by the video crew to stay here. So it's not because of my arrogance that I want to stay on a podium. It's to make the video better. That's why I'm in a bit of a different location. And let me start by saying that it is truly unique and special that we are here on a Saturday afternoon, and there are so many people interested in their free time to learn and to develop themselves. That's not something that happens at every conference. So most business conferences are happening in weekdays, not on weekends, in work time, not free time. So thank you all for coming. Unfortunately, I don't speak Russian, so not like the previous speaker, I'm unable to welcome you in Russian. But what I can do and what I hope to do is to show you something during this presentation that I think the majority of the companies today are not doing, but hopefully you will recognize the importance of it. And by the time you leave the room, you will be eager to get back to the office and start a project to create your very own sourcing strategy. The reason why I have a rather big experience in this subject is because the company I work for, called Randstad Sourceright, is an RPO provider. RPO means recruitment process outsourcing. So other companies outsource their whole recruitment process to us. Instead of just giving the difficult positions, they chose to give the whole to us, effectively meaning that the recruiters sitting at those companies are managed by us, they are our recruiters, and we support them from back offices all across the globe. Because of that, during my 6 years with the company, I've managed to oversee around 150 different recruitment processes. So I see many mistakes, many good things. And one of my major tasks at our company is to try to come up, whenever we have a new client, with the ideal sourcing strategy for that client. Now, the first thing to define when we talk about sourcing strategies is actually what is a sourcing strategy. And that's not that straightforward as you might expect. And there are two reasons for that. One is sourcing, and the other is strategy. So we are talking about a phrase where both words within the phrase are debated and don't have a universal definition. So it's obvious that if we put together those two single debated words, we come up with something that has an even less of a universal definition. But I will try to tell you how I define them. You can define them in your very own way, but for the rest of this presentation, this is going to be at least a useful standard for all of us. Let's start with the first word in that phrase, sourcing. Now, one of the things what is always coming up in debates is whether is sourcing part of the recruitment, is sourcing not part of recruitment. I think that's less the topic that we need to focus on. What is most important for me when I define sourcing is that it should include every possible way how you can find and attract a candidate to your company. So it should also include proactive ways when you are searching out the candidates, and it should also include methods which help the candidate reach out to your company in order to apply to you, in order to start working for you. So that's what when I speak about sourcing strategies, that's what I will be talking about, all of the methods how we can find and attract people. The second part, the strategy, that's also always a very funny thing, and I'm not sure whether that's just true about the recruitment industry or is the same about every other industry, but everyone seems to be talking about strategic things. Whenever we are talking about simply tips, somehow the synonym is being used and they are being called strategies. So at conferences, in breaks, often people come to me and ask for, hey, what's your best sourcing strategy? Or I'm struggling with this position, what would be a sourcing strategy for this position? And what they typically mean is tactics or tips or some things that I definitely consider wording-wise a step below from strategy. Because when we talk about strategies, then the father of strategies, Michael Porter, defined them, is that it's really a broad formula how we should be competing, thinking forward, what we should be doing to carry out our long-term goals. A more simplistic Oxford Dictionary definition is it's really just a plan of action designed to reach a long-term overall aim. So mashing together sourcing and strategy really that's the gist of it. So when we are creating sourcing strategies for our clients, we want to have something put in place whenever we start working on them that will help us internally define and communicate with them how we are going to fill their positions. What are going to be the ways how we can find and attract candidates. And that's typically something that is also very important for stakeholders at our clients, or for, in your case, in case of in-house people, probably for CEOs, for HR managers. It's something that's important for them to see, but that's also dangerous because there are a lot of people I know who are only creating these type of things in order to impress someone in the organization, or in order to document something and have something in writing. And that's not really the purpose. So if those are your only goals, then don't even start a project of creating a sourcing strategy. What are good goals or true goals? What I would suggest why you want to create one is because you are not satisfied with something that's going on today in your sourcing processes. So you want to find better people, you want to find people faster, you want to organize things differently. So there's something you can and you want to improve on. Or even if you are satisfied today, you just know that there are shifts in the market, both within your industry and both within recruitment. So you want to make sure that what you are doing today is also going to stay relevant, also going to stay future-proof, and you will be able to prepare for the future from a perspective of recruiting. So if you made the decision based on these goals and you know that, yes, I do want to start creating a sourcing strategy, then there are 3 questions that essentially you need to answer. So your end result, the sourcing strategy, answers these 3 questions. What is the talent you seek? So who are the people you are hiring? Where they are? That's a bit of a more complex question than it seems at first. I will tell you why. And how can you attract and search them? Let's start with the first one. Because I think it's obvious, by the way, how I define it, that if you are hiring for 500 positions, there is no way you can have anything documented what covers all 500 positions. That's just too broad. But also, you cannot have just one way of how you recruit people or how you source people. It's obvious that with one and the same method, it's not going to apply for all the types of candidates you are hiring. So what you need to do as a first exercise is try to come up with talent segments. Segmentation in some companies is very easy. So sometimes says, yes, each year we are hiring 50 Java developers, 50 .NET developers, 50 sales engineers, 20 back office, and pretty much that's it. In some other cases, it's a more complex question. So you need to do some data analysis, you need to speak with HR managers, and the difficulty what we see is there is not always a hiring forecast. So not every one of our clients, or the majority of our clients, maybe that's the reason why they turn to an RPO provider, they can't just tell us what they will be hiring. So it can be a big challenge to understand those segments, but we do need to narrow it down to 10, 15 type of profiles, and then create a separate approach for each of those 10, 15. For each point, I'm trying to bring up a practical challenge as well to bring it closer to you. And one of the clients which we were trying to do this segmentation on, they didn't have any of our usual data sources. So they didn't have a hiring forecast, which is the number one, the easiest data source. They didn't have an ATS, so we couldn't also check what positions are they doing now. They didn't have any historical data from the past year because they didn't have an ATS. There was nothing to report the historical data from. So the only thing that we could check is, okay, what type of profiles do you have in the company today? But obviously the fluctuation between these profiles is different, the business strategy is different. So what we needed to do, we made a lot of focus interviews, both with recruiters and HR managers, but also just simply with hiring managers, with business people. What do you expect? How many people do you expect to hire? And based on that, we had to essentially create a hiring forecast sort of thing on behalf of our client. So then we can move on to the other parts of the sourcing strategy. And you see some of the example questions on the slide for those who because unfortunately I don't have it in Russian. So for those who do not read it in English, those questions are really around, okay, how many vacancies were there in different locations, which locations hired the most people, which vacancies took longest to fill. So these were some of the example questions we asked in those interviews, and then which we compiled into one data set in order to know what talent segments should we create the strategies from. Once we have those segmentations, the next question is to understand, okay, we know that these are the segments we want to hire for. We've written it down, it's page 1 of the strategy. Now the question is, okay, where are they? And where are they is a question which, although in most languages, I don't know the connotations of the word where in the Russian language, but in most languages where people simply think about geography. So which region, which city, where can we find these candidates? But that's not just it. It's really a multidimensional question. So besides knowing geographically where they are, we also need to know where they are from a professional blueprint. Which target companies are they working at? Which possibly even different industries are they working at? So majority of our clients and the majority of the companies know who their direct competitors are, but they may not think about, okay, outside of our industry, which other companies are employing the same types of profiles. And those are your direct talent competitors. Those are companies you should incorporate inside your sourcing strategy to try and lure people away from. Another dimension or another aspect of the question where is socially. What type of events are your potential candidates in this talent segment attending? What schools did they go to? What communities and what meetups do they have between each other? So how they are socially interacting between each other and with different groups. And of course, from a sourcing perspective, perhaps the most important question is, where are they online? So what is the online footprint of these candidates? What forums are they visiting to ask and discuss their questions? Which social medias do they have their profiles on? What blogs are they reading, potentially even writing? What job sites are they visiting? And generally, what do they do on the internet? Again, a practical example of how that looks like. So within one client, we had a position, a pharma position inside France, where we try to identify from all of these dimensions where that talent is. The first thing we noted that while the position is in France, actually a big chunk of our talent pool is in neighboring countries. So it's in Switzerland, because a significant part of Switzerland also speaks French. It's also in the Benelux countries, where in Belgium, for example, people also speak French. Or from a professional standpoint, there's also a big talent pool inside Germany, where while they don't have the language capabilities, they have all the skills what our company needs. Professionally, we had to map out all of the big companies that are there and they're employing these people in all of these countries, because we already learned that it's also a matter of different countries. And also socially, we understood what universities, alumni networks, what events they are doing. Online, besides the usual networking sites, there were also special pharma networking sites where they were using and we needed to map out. So this just shows that when you need to think about, okay, where they are, you really need to think about it from multiple dimensions. At this stage, you are at question 3. You know what the talent segments are that you want to hire from. You know where those talent segments are from multiple dimensions. Now comes really the most important, the majority part of the strategy. Okay, how am I going to find and attract these type of people? And at this stage, what I like to do, and that's probably one of the most enjoyable things that I or my colleagues do in their work, is really to have a brainstorming session together, even with business aligned people, so various hiring managers, together with recruiters who were previously working in similar positions, whether they are from our organization or from the client organization. And as it typically goes in brainstorming, at this stage, no idea is a bad idea. So you just really want to think about all the possible ways how you can attract talent, because yes, the sourcing strategy will cover the simple, typical things like which job boards you need to search on, or which job boards you need to post on, or which social media you need to search. Of course, they are typically going to be in for 80% of the positions. But there's always more ways how you can find people, and there are ways which you may not even think about. So speaking with one of the local companies, manufacturing company, what I understood, for example, and what we understood from just simply a manager working there, that every day when he goes to the work, there is a really bad radio frequency area where it's just 4 radios which are working properly, and only one of those radios have a morning show. I don't know, are radio morning shows a popular thing in Russia? So do you have them too? So he assumed, and he was right in that most people who are working into that industrial park and are driving by car in the morning, the most of them are listening to that one radio channel. So advertising within that morning show in a spot was actually a very effective recruitment method for us to reach a target audience, which you normally wouldn't do. So normally you don't run radio ads these days, except for African countries. We have some experience with that too. But in this case, it was a good method, and it was a very cheap one compared to online job postings, for example. So also, that's not my example, but there are videos on the internet in Czech Republic, and that's an IT example. That's why I want to mention it in an IT conference, that they were looking for developers, and I'm sure you know and you face the same thing, that the biggest challenge in recruiting IT is that the candidates are not responding. So you can find them, but then how do I contact them? They are just not coming back, because there's so many recruiters who I'm competing with and who are trying to get to reach them. So what they did, and there's a video of that, they made a big paper, and they got 2 drones, and the 2 drones flew up that big message paper outside of the window of an IT office, and there was a message that we are hiring and the salary. And that was that was surprising for people in the office to see, and most of the people in that office were IT professionals. So there are always very different things you can do, and at the brainstorming stage, really just let your mind go and write up as many ideas as you can. Once you're done with that, so once you have a long list of potential methods, that's when you start crossing them out. So, okay, out of these, which are worth to use? So you start narrowing down your list. Out of those, which will result in the best ROI? So you also prioritize them. That I will try these 20 methods, and in this order. The next thing to decide that, besides what channel we want to use, how we will use it. So as mentioned, especially in the IT space, just finding the candidates is not enough. I also need to know what my messaging strategy is going to be like. And this really, really strongly ties into what we discussed before. Because if I already profiled those people and I know where they are, geographically, I know where they are socially, then I can simply come up with better messages to them. I know what the potential selling points can be for that person. So I can really center and tailor my messaging around that. And in the strategy, really, that you are just giving guidelines to people, so guidelines to the recruiters who will in the future utilize these, and list the most important messages and tie them to the channels. Going to the same practical example that we had before, here is the map picture of what I mentioned before of where our potential talent pool is. Besides the countries I mentioned, the obvious candidates in Nordics also have similar profiles. And then we went on and, okay, so we know people are here. We know that these people are going to specialized universities. So we need to make sure that we go to these universities and we go to the prominent job boards in those countries. But what can we say to them that makes them change the work of the country? Because we've heard from the onboarding presentation that when they relocate to Estonia, then people receive a nice brochure and they know what to do at the time. That's actually great for recruitment too. So we try to do similar things. Obviously, it's typically not a printed but an electronic version. So we already try to collect the why it is great to move here information and give them to the potential candidates, not just to the people who we hired, because that can help convince those people to move to my location. Again, that was from a where the candidates are perspective from a geographical location. But I also mentioned that there is a dimension of, for example, different industries or different companies. There is also preparations you can do for that. So there are global websites like Glassdoor. Typically, there are in-country equivalents for that too. So I'm sure that there is an in-country equivalent for Russia, where you can see how people rate their experiences at the company. So it's a very prudent and important thing to do, that if I know the talent competitors, if I know who will be the companies I will try to lure people from, then I can also prepare and check these reviews and compare it with my own company. And then I can notice patterns. Hey, at that company, people typically complain about lack of work-life balance. At this company, people typically complain about there is not having a clear management structure. So you can find those common things, what people are dissatisfied with at your competitors, at the people who you want to hire from. Those can be the messages you build in your sourcing strategy of why and how I will convince people from that company to join into mine. Just the very typical question that I get at this point is, we already recapped that in the sourcing strategy we have one thing, who are the talent segments. We also have where are the people from these talent segments, and we also have the information of, okay, how are we going to find them, how are we going to attract them. But how should I imagine this in practice? How should I put this together on paper? How should this look like? So that's a very frequent question I'm getting. And in the past, when 4 years ago I introduced this practice to our company, I had an initial look and feel of how a strategy looks. Over time, I've discussed more, I've understood more and more that the format actually doesn't matter that much. So you can just use what works best for your company. So it can be a document. So on the right side, we see that for some traditional proper companies, it's really a Word document. So the one on the right, the print screen on the right, that comes from a 40-page Word document. For some companies who are more on the design side, and it's a trendy young brand, one thing we did is what you see here on the left is essentially it all runs on Google Drive via PDF files, and it's like a mock-up website. So you see these buttons, and then you are clicking on that button, and it takes you to a next page where you have that information. So it's really, you can navigate through it, and the end information. So inside of having one 40-page document, you have it chunked up into 1, 2, or 3 pages per segment, so sort of mini bits of information, and then you put this navigation on top. It might be easier, it might be more accepted in those candidates who like the design side of things. Some other companies, what we see there on the top, they like spreadsheets. So we have all of this information organized in one big Excel file on one big Google spreadsheet, and we have it laid out there. One thing with what we are trying to reach now, we already have 2-3 clients on that new format, and I'm hoping that will become the new standard practice for us, is we have a dedicated website with all the information. So essentially the strategy is a website. And on that website you have all the standard information, and that's where you can browse to what are the talent profiles. That's where you can browse to, okay, if this is the talent profile, then how am I recruiting for that? So this is just to show you that as long as you put it in, as long as you think about how I will source for these positions, not only now, but next year, 2 years ahead, 3 years ahead, it doesn't matter how you recap it. Recap it what works best for your management or for yourself. The last bit, and I think that's probably the most important bit of the whole presentation, is really the practical tips of, okay, that all sounds awesome. I recognize we need to do that. I recognize that what we are doing today is probably just based on experience and because we know how it works, but we didn't really have a formal plan of discovering all the best options. But how and when should I do that? And I think both the how and both the when are important, because the number one thing in this implementation journey is to have the proper stakeholder engagement. So talk about this with the people at your company who are most invested in this, or most important stakeholders for this perspective. So with the high-level directors, with your HR managers, those whose life it should make easier, and see how engaged and how interested they are. If they are not, then it's a struggle what is probably not worth it, because it will not go through. Then the matter of when comes into question, because do this when they are engaged. Eventually they will be, I can guarantee you, because there is no recruitment process I saw where there are no issues or there are no problems. Everywhere at every company there is something to improve on, and everywhere there are dissatisfied hiring managers. Pound on a moment when that happens, when there is dissatisfaction, and that's when you can tell, okay, now we need to start this project, and this is able to solve with the proper funding, with the proper help from all of the operations. This will help us solve those problems, because you need resources and time dedicated. So for us, and because we do it so many times, because we have new clients, it takes around a month to create a new sourcing strategy. If you create it first time in your life, it may create 2 months, 3 months. So that is really significant resource and time investment. Plus, it's not just the time of the people who run the project, it's also the time of the people who they are interviewing, who they are having discussions with in order to help create the strategy. Once the decision has been made that, okay, this is a project we will do, then the next stage, what I believe is very important, is, okay, we need to keep updating the people. So if you just have a discussion at the end of the month, and then 4 weeks later you come back and show them, hey, so we have it ready, then they may be happy about it, sure, but I'm not sure how well that strategy will actually be followed. So if people are involved in the creation of something, if their opinions are being elaborated, they are being worked in, then they have much higher acceptance, and it's much more likely that it will not stay a paper, but it will actually be a adopted and maintained strategy. Because that's very important, and that's what we see there at the top. So this is not a one-time, just a one-time only exercise. The whole reason why we created this is to be able to adapt to all the changes what our industry and what the recruitment industry mandate. So you will need to continuously review these things. And after the brainstorming, you made a list of the things you tried. Well, newsflash, some of them will not work. Some of them will work, some of them will not. So what you need to do is, after you try those methods, you continuously update your strategy. You go back to it, you cross out those methods, and you write down that, hey, we tried, this is how we tried, this was the ROI, now this is the next step, or we will not try this again. And you also need to try and come up with new methods. Whenever something's working, add it to the strategy, to the section, hey, this is working for us, we should continue doing this. Whenever something was not working for you, cross out from the section. Really the takeaway from this part, what I want you to have is after you create a strategy, that's a big initial project, and then it's a continuous maintaining project. But the huge benefit of that is while you are maintaining, you are also promoting recruiting excellence. So you are also encouraging your recruiters and your sourcers to not just do what they did so far, but broaden their horizon and try again, try out new stuffs, try different ways to reach candidates, try different ways to attract them, and generally make sure that your recruiting engine is continuously developing and is not in a stale state. So that's what I wanted to share from my perspective, and I was asked to leave some time for the questions. So this is the time for the questions.
Let's clap first.
One, two. Wins, thanks a lot for your presentation. My name is Max Kuznetsov, and I'm a recruitment team lead in Mail.ru Group. Basically, I got two questions I would like to find out as a help. First of all, in terms of measuring recruitment and specifically sourcing strategy, effectiveness and efficiency, what are the most important and what are the most applicable metrics according to your opinion?
I think so. There are a couple of really classical ones. What I think is definitely worth measuring with this. One of them is, of course, the time to hire. So that's a number you want to keep down. For us, it's difficult to measure what happens with and without a sourcing strategy, because for every new client, we are putting a sourcing strategy in place. So that's whenever someone comes over to us, it's a combination of things. It's not just the sourcing strategy that's new, but different people will do it. Because so far it was a recruitment process at that company, and now they are embracing an RPO. So what we did when we were trying to think about how to do it, we took our old clients. So those clients who were implemented with us before we continuously did sourcing strategies. And that's one of the things we had in mind, is to check whether updating and maintaining sourcing strategies helps with the time to hire, and whether can we also decrease some of the budget that we are spending on recruitment. There were programs where we achieved both, and there were programs where it was more about one of them. I don't know your specific situation, but I can also share that if I would send a survey to all of my clients, the major problem that they perceive with the recruitment process would not be the same. So from these two methods, some of them would say, yeah, let's do it from a budget perspective for cheaper, while some of them would say, no, I don't care about the budget, I want the best people and I want the people faster. So really knowing that, what is more important for them, that helps you with the brainstorming of what you try to do differently, and then that's what you need to measure against. So I'm not sure what you get where I'm trying to get, I'm not making myself entirely clear here. I'm trying to say that I don't suggest to use universal checkpoints. I suggest to use checkpoints against what was the original problem that triggered you to create the sourcing strategy. In our case, that has been typically decreasing the budget and helping with the time to hire.
Yeah, okay, thanks a lot. And second question in terms of changing your sourcing strategy and delivering of some changes into it. Are there any tips in terms of adapting your team into these changes?
Yeah.
Recruitment team, I mean, definitely.
So I love this question because this is something that we had to evolve a lot during the time. So the adaptation rate of our first strategies is much different from the adaptation rate of the strategies we create today. And I think there are two big reasons for that. One of them is one of the tips I shared earlier. So at the early strategies, we didn't do that much involving as I feel we should have done. So we pretty much created a strategy, a bunch of smart people created a strategy and put it on the desk that, hey guys, this is a smart strategy, use it. And they said, thanks. We are smart too, we know what we are doing. So that didn't work out with as high acceptance rate. So what we have changed and what I was trying to promote now too is involve them in the creation, ask for their opinion. So we shifted from this, a group of smart guys is creating something into a group of smart guys who may be smart and know about recruitment, but they go to you, the practitioner, and they ask you what has worked well, what hasn't worked well. They analyze the data and they take in your opinion. And this something is being built based on your opinion. And you have the editing rights, and you can also make changes, and you can also add new things. So that helped us a lot with the adoption. If people are much more likely to adopt something they have created instead of something that someone created for them.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Any more questions?
I think someone was raising
2
his
minutes
hand.
more. Russian questions? No. Well, if we have no questions on the stage, let's thanks Vince
Thank you
again,
very much
and
for your
please
attention.
approach him during the coffee breaks and during the lunch break and ask about your specific examples of the sourcing strategies. Thank you so much.
Thank you.